Awesome. Thank you so much, Roz, for having us and inviting us to be part of this awesome event. Super excited to engage with this audience and provide some updates on kind of where we're going with Dataverse and some of the recent things that we've released and what's coming up. Joining me, as Roz mentioned, we've got James, who kind of heads up product for us on the Dataverse side. He's going to walk you through a bunch of awesome content and customer stories, and then we'll kind of end off with a Q&A session where we can dive into anything that you guys are interested in talking about. So without further ado, James, hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Really happy to be here today. I know we shared the link ahead of time. I will try to get through a lot of the content so we have time to answer some of your questions. I've already seen them flowing in. And I preface this before I give a high level of some of the things that we're working on is I even seen some questions in the poll around how do I get started? And that is super top of mind to us as well. We actually just had our first instructor-led course that we previewed in the first Power Platform conference in September. And we're trying to iterate from there. We know that Dataverse content and learning is kind of combined in many different products today, be it Dynamics or Power Platform. We're trying to learn and trying to improve. So take a look. Let us know if this would have been helpful, or if you have your own way that you upskill yourself or your team if you're part of a broader group around this. But without further ado, there's three areas that I'm going to talk about. Some of the investments that we're doing, some of the customers that I think really exemplify some of the work that we're doing, and some of this might be new to some of the folks here, and some of this might be interesting. And I'm also going to get some hints on roadmap and direction at the end before our Q&A, and you can ask us anything along the way. And really our focus is around three different pillars. It's around improving the approachability of the tool set that we already have today for Dataverse. And if you're an historical like Dynamics MVP or customizer, you're used to essentially like a different tool set. We're really striving to make that more approachable to a broader set of individuals. And then once you build on the platform, we're really trying to accelerate delivery through more integrations, more capabilities that you don't have to go build. You don't have to go build in a bespoke custom way, because we'll do it for you and make it seamless. And we're going to talk about some of the things we're doing. And then also we're going to talk about how we really are built for enterprise, how you not only can scale further, and we're allowing workloads to scale further, but we're trying to make more aspects of compliance and security types of concerns and mitigations more turnkey. And the idea is that we reduce the cost of building new apps. We make those apps more reliable, higher performance. When we reduce the time to market, we save customers money, we save you all money. That's really what we're trying to do from a platform perspective along these three vectors. Now, without further ado, I'm going to kind of dive into each of these areas and talk about some of the things that we're doing. And approachable data, if you've seen Make.PowerApps.com, you know that we got kind of a facelift of the new experiences, especially around kind of building your data modeling and the Table Hub experience. I'm not going to go super into detail there, but I'm going to talk about a couple aspects within kind of the data workspace of building and getting your data estate started on Dataverse that we're progressing. And these are some of kind of the core tenets. And we'll share the deck after the fact in case you want to beg, borrow, and steal some of this content or wallow on it after the fact. But one of the things we're really excited about is the idea that, maybe not some of the more experienced some of you on the call today, but some of the newer folks or, ways of tackling the longer tailed applications is really repressing this idea that AI can assist with getting your app started, kind of bootstrapping your data model. And today in preview in Power Apps, you can bring a Figma or an image of the app you want to go build. You enter that into the portal, and it not only creates the scaffolding of the app and the screens, but it also creates the tables and the data model underneath the covers for Dataverse. And again, this might not be applicable to all of you kind of who are more advanced, but think of this as just a direction that we're going. This idea that you bring some idea, bring some asset, maybe it's even an Excel file going forward, and we help you get started. We help you bootstrap that process much, much faster is a direction that we're going. And this is just kind of that first step along that journey, because we want you to spend more time on adding value and customizing the app and less time getting started just bootstrapping your solution. And the second thing that we're really doing is this belief that there is data that is already mastered elsewhere in your data estate or your customer's data estate, that you don't want to or don't have time or money to re-platform. And part of that is this push, this continued push for a long time around virtual tables. And so the idea is that not that this has not been possible through virtual table providers and connection references on the platform before, but we have a better experience around and more seamless kind of guided experience that's in preview, actually kind of private preview today. I think it might be hitting preview very soon, within the Maker portal to go and set this up. And yes, we're starting with kind of a first set of providers of SQL, SharePoint, and Excel, but I think the idea that we were really trying to vet and directionally from the feedback of the community is, where are there operational systems or pools of common data that you can't move, but you still want to activate and tie business logic and security on top of within the platform, within the Power Platform for Dynamics. And we're trying to make the setup of that and the management of that easier with the better kind of wizard-like experience of building that in the experience. And so if you haven't tried this out, I'll have a link later, but this is kind of like a direction that we're investing in. Also, if you've done data integration into the platform, you know that there's many different ways of doing it. We have many different partners. We obviously have our OData web APIs and a lot of pro dev solutions like an Azure Data Factory that you can use to code against that. But one direction we're also trying to advance is around the data flows, the lower code way of doing data integration into the platform. And it's not perfect today. And it's a point of emphasis for us to make the throughput and the upload and the sync faster for these going forward. We're looking on bringing more of the connector ecosystems that exist for Power BI data flows into Power Platform, and we're looking to make these easier to manage and easier to monitor over time, because we want, again, like less time building data integration solutions, more time relying on the components of the platform. So this is another area that, again, if you haven't tried out, there's a lot of value you can get out of today. But it's also an area that we're going to continue to invest and make more seamless going forward. Another area that's very exciting is, I know that some of you may have been familiar with formula columns in the context of Dataverse for Teams. The idea that we're taking that Excel-like language that, if you're familiar with building on Canvas apps today or Excel, that you use to build that declarative business logic within your applications. Well, that is now coming soon. In fact, in kind of limited preview today, to any Dataverse environment. It's not just Dataverse for Teams. So it's this idea that not that you can't do this types of customization already, but that we're bringing that approachability and a common language also to Dataverse around building these types of reusable business logic. And we're not just stopping with formula columns. The idea is that PowerFX is that low-code customization language for Dataverse. So formula columns, our vision is that supplants calculated fields, right? Not that there's a migration, but it's just going to happen behind the scenes. Those same calculated fields, now you're allowed to customize that through PowerFX versus some of the legacy tooling and designers that we have. And then likewise with, if you're leveraging a substantial number of our customization through plugins or custom actions today, which I know that a ton of people do, well, what if you can go and author that in PowerFX? This is the direction that we're trying to go, essentially bringing, Dataverse in a more approachable way to not just be that way of storing kind of the low-code way of building your data state, but also the low-code way around building those reusable business logic, right? The calculated columns, the business rules, the custom actions and plugins, trying to bring a much more approachable layer to that. This is like a real point of emphasis for us going forward. And so I covered a ton, I know, right there. And if you do want to get started, check out the lab assets I shared. There's also, these are great AKMS links. You can take a screenshot and we'll share the deck later. But these are all really good areas to kind of get started if you're new. And then they're also hopefully areas that you probably spend a lot of time on today if you're doing development. And we hope that it just makes that next project even easier that you have to get started, right? Not only where you develop, how you pull data in, how you build your reusable business logic, but then also how you activate your data that you maybe don't want to re-platform and migrate. Awesome. I know I'm covering things at a high pace, but I want to try to get through some of the content so we save time for the questions. Now, the second pillar is really around, like, let's say you've built that solution. So let's say you pulled your data estate in. What are we doing to kind of, outside of obviously that really native integration with Power Apps and Power Automates, like what else lights up for you because you've bet on the platform, which is again like a key thing that we are really striving to be. We're trying to be that catalyst for delivery, catalyst for development, because you did that work to kind of like pull in your data and business logic into the platform more natively. And the first thing that's really, really exciting that kind of pulls together a lot of different pieces that we even talked about with some of the virtual table and data connectivity stuff just previously is, if you haven't checked it out, the collaborative controls that are available for data that's already in M365. And what's really cool about this is that if you can actually go, pull these into your solution and go into the modern designer, like you can have these rich controls around how to work with files in SharePoint, approvals within M365, meetings and Outlook, right? And have rich controls that work against that data. And Dataverse is the fabric that virtualizes that data, but you can leverage the same application development experience. And I think this is just the first, I think, slew of these types of capabilities where it's really around giving richer controls within model-driven apps or Canvas apps. Or you can see the same thing as kind of the equivalent of templates within Power Automate. But how do we light up more richer, more modern experiences because you have this Dataverse platform behind the scenes? And this is just one example. If you look at like the Creator Toolkit, this is kind of an example of just kind of raw controls. These are bound controls to data. And I think there's a real direction that we're evaluating around how we can have those same kind of bound controls, not just on M365 data, but also for Canvas apps to have those same bound controls in the context of data you already have in Dataverse. You have a more like richer experience for building your type of custom pages or Canvas apps. Now, what I'm also going to talk about here is kind of a slew of activation scenarios of data on the platform today. And some of these might seem like you already know them, or you might learn something new. And I just want to kind of rattle some of these off and kind of open your minds to some of the things that are possible today. Oh no, I forgot that I didn't share my sound coming up here. And the first thing is the idea that all of your data in Dataverse is and one-click accessible within Excel today through that Get Data Power Query experience. And what's cool going forward, something that we're evaluating, is this is just kind of the raw data model and you have to pull it in. But there's this work that we're pursuing with some of the Dynamics apps, which is you're customizing those apps. The idea that there's more curated data sets from those apps that are available, to start to build within experiences like the pivot table type of experiences within Excel is a direction that we're working on. So it's more than just having to pull in that raw data, but it's more around, think of it as like extending and analyzing some of the richer data sets that may already be populated there by Dynamics apps or some of the ISV apps. So this is definitely a direction that we're investigating more in. The second thing, and this actually has just rolled out in broader preview, is this idea that already in your model-driven either Power Apps or Dynamics apps, you now have this ability to just within the experience build a visualization of that view that the user is viewing. And what this actually does is it kind of loads Power BI up, a pre-generated dashboard that you don't have to customize. And it's all powered on the Dataverse analytical query engine underneath the covers, right? And what's really cool about this is with one click, those same users can go save that report into powerbi.com if they want to further extend it or share it with others. And the cool thing about this is that not only does this have a lot of novelty where you don't have to go build, kind of like a a reporting interface on top of your data or your data state that you've already built on Dataverse. You get it out of box for your application. But not only that, like we're bringing this type of pattern to more types of the out of box applications, which brings even more power because they're going to ship with more and more custom types of reports in app that also can be saved and extended within PowerBI.com going forward. And if you do want to go create those, and if you're not already aware that you can go create your own Power BI reports on top of data and Dataverse, then please, and I know I think even Ryan had talked about this in the summit last year, but the fact that there is this first class connector within Power BI for you to build your data on, that we're constantly improving, and we're working on actually expanding the query limits for the types of the amount, essentially the scale of data that you can pull in. This is really, really, really an awesome way of having an end-to-end business process solution that not only tackles the operational side of your business process through Dataverse and Power Platform or Dynamics, but then also has those operational reports for executives, for the project managers to back them without having to go rebuild a data warehouse underneath the covers. You can just connect to the data estate that you've already set up within Dataverse. And what's really cool about that is not only can you kind of build those reports and ship them in PowerBI.com, but now you can really include Power BI components as a part of your solution. And this was something that was announced 2 months ago at the Power Platform Conference, but you can add a Power BI report more seamlessly as a part of your solution, as opposed to just linking to it like you used to be able to do previously. And this is really kind of one milestone, I think, in yet a longer direction around the Power Platform in name has all of these operational solutions of building low-code apps, low-code websites, low-code bots, low-code workflows. And then you can do all your business intelligence over here. And it's all under the Power Platform moniker, but now we're starting to bring that together in reality where you actually can compose a solution that has all of these components from the full breadth of the Power Platform all in one. And so check this out. There's a couple of great blogs from Teddy on this, even on the Power BI website. If something to try out, it's really, again, yet another direction around how we're making that end-to-end of a solution so much more seamless to be able to build. All right, and the next thing I want to share is a really awesome video. It's about 5 minutes. It talks about a capability that we've had in market for a year. It's called Synapse Link for Dataverse. Not that it's new, but there's this really awesome story from this customer called Degrees of Change that's really put it into action. And so if any of you have heard about Synapse Link, hopefully this will at minimum generate some ideas around maybe some of the things you can do for your data or your customers' data that's already in Dataverse today. So I'm going to play the video and then talk about some of the things we're working on after that.
Data-driven organization, Degrees of Change is laser focused on building effective programs that maximize positive outcomes for our students. We leverage technology to provide personalized support to our program participants, and we relentlessly measure and evaluate the effectiveness of our efforts. Over the past few years, we've migrated a range of data sources to Dataverse, which now acts as a single source of truth for our program data and unlocks all the capabilities of the Power Platform. Students apply for our programs and stay connected with us through a Power Pages portal. Canvas Power Apps allow hundreds of volunteers to securely review and score more than 1,000 scholarship applications each year. And model-driven apps enable our staff across 7 cities to monitor and stay in touch with more than 400 students across 15 college campuses in 5 states. Power Automate allows integrations across all those apps, simplifies tedious tasks, and improves our communication with students. Finally, we've developed a couple dozen detailed Power BI reports, many of which contain interactive embedded Canvas apps that help our frontline staff turn data into insight and action. So the Power Platform has allowed us to do all of this with a very small team of 1 IT staffer, 2 citizen devs from our program operations team, and me, who also has a few other responsibilities as CEO of the organization. So until recently, we used the data export service to mirror our Dataverse data into an Azure SQL database where we could write SQL views to do complex calculations across multiple tables to generate early warning concern measures for our students and reshape our data into star schemas for the most efficient analysis in Power BI. So when Microsoft announced the data export service is being deprecated in the move to Synapse Link, I was initially super concerned because we had so much critical business logic wrapped up in SQL, and I didn't know much about data lakes. I never used Synapse Analytics. But with just a little bit of reading, I was able to learn what I needed, create a Synapse workspace in Azure, and configure Synapse Link in just a couple of hours. And once you're set up in Azure, you can see here how quickly you can connect to Synapse, select the tables to sync, jump over and discover them in your Synapse workspace, and easily surface your data in an auto-generated SQL script. So with just a little effort, we were able to begin migrating our existing SQL views into Synapse. And as you can see here, mostly copying, pasting, and making small tweaks to the code so that we could surface those views to Power BI and other apps through the Synapse serverless SQL pool, which will be more cost-effective than the dedicated Azure SQL Server we've been running. So we're getting back to where we started, but now we're beginning to discover how much more is possible in Synapse. So I have two examples for you. First, we stay engaged with our students and we survey them frequently using Dynamics Customer Voice, automated by Power Automate. But that generates a lot of data, particularly when we're asking free response questions about students' experience and leadership on campus. And for our staff, it can take a lot of time to read through all of those responses right away so that they can reach out quickly to those students who are facing challenges. So we're really excited to see how easily Synapse allows us to leverage out-of-the-box sentiment analysis from Microsoft's cognitive services in just a few clicks to flag and review free text survey responses that express negative sentiment. This will allow our staff to prioritize their time to review and respond to students with the most pressing issues. So that's pretty cool and super easy, but it starts to get even more fun when we realize the ways that Synapse can make even more complex machine learning capabilities accessible to us. So I'll end with this example that we're building for the future. So every year, our community volunteers review and score over 1,000 scholarship applications for our flagship program. We're all about identifying and investing in leaders who are often overlooked in the traditional college process, so we work hard to avoid that bias. But when volunteers are reading thousands of pages of essays, there's always the risk of overlooking students with potential. And we never have the time in our decision meetings to discuss every student who applies. So, working with Jason, Sabine, and Melinda, we've started to build out a custom AI model that will combine text analysis of essays with the wide range of quantitative measures that we collect to help identify applicants who may have similar characteristics or express themselves in ways similar to our students who've been successful in the past. While this is never going to replace the holistic human review we do and the thoughtful discussions that we have to make decisions, it might add one more layer to identify a student for consideration who might otherwise have been overlooked. So this model has a ways to go, but you can get a sense here of how Synapse will allow us to use Apache Spark to build, train, and test a basic AI model to use freeform applicant essays to predict program fit using the tens of thousands of applications we've evaluated over the past 20 years. And we can do it all right within Synapse. So we're really excited about all the capabilities that Synapse Link is unlocking for us. And we're looking forward to seeing what new functionality is coming in the months ahead.
And what's even more cool about that story is it's Tim and I believe one other person that have built out a series of business processes on Dataverse, and this is a part-time job for him. So it's really not only an inspiring mission, but also an inspiring way that they're really able to do so much more with less because they've kind of built on the platform. And the cool thing is that we're investing even more in this idea that you spent a lot of time building your data, building your solutions with Dataverse at the core, you should be able to get more out of it. And so not only have we made improvements like already bringing option sets to be able to participate in Synapse Link, but there's a bunch of work that we're doing to be able to have that data be egressed into ADLS within Synapse Analytics, not just in CSV format, but in Parquet, Delta Lake format, such that it will support faster queries for those serverless types of queries and Spark jobs that you're going to be operating on top of that data once it's in Synapse, because you're trying to kind of modernize that data analytics and warehousing capabilities, right? And the idea is that we're going to continue improving this, breaking through some of the issues that I know we've heard with some of the customers that are moving from data export service to Synapse Link, such as being able to support Synapse Link connectivity to private endpoint restricted storage accounts. That's something that we're working on right now. And also the improving kind of the regional support and parity with the current capabilities we have for Dataverse. So this is a really cool, again, a slew of different capabilities that allow you to do more, accelerate delivery based on the data that you already have, the work you've already done on Dataverse through the Power Platform and Dynamics today. And the last area that I'm going to talk about before we get to the many questions here, but try to blaze through this in about 5 minutes here, is talking about how by betting on Dataverse, you're also betting on a platform that's built to last. It's built for enterprises. And with that comes not only that bet on that security layer that Azure has and the additional application security you can layer on top of it, but it's that hyperscale data platform that you get along with it. The idea that you can do more management over your data, you have more control in a low-code way without having to go full pro dev, and you can meet the requirements of your IT and sec teams before you want to roll these solutions out to production. And the really quick example that I'm not going to belabor here is there's a customer that went on stage with me at the Power Platform Conference, and he was another Tim Heron for Degrees of Change, but his name was Hui, and he worked for ExxonMobil. And their scenario was one where they were doing this massive annual maintenance plan business process at this large mining site in Canada, excuse me, and they were literally doing it. And this is one of the many Excel spreadsheets they were using, right, in order to analyze the risk of maintaining some of these vehicles and processes on this mining site. And they were doing it all in Excel. They were using Excel as a database, and they went from this world where they were doing these tens of Excel spreadsheets with hundreds of tables in there that you couldn't even read them, that were being collaborated on by users, and they ported over their solution to Dataverse, which I'm not going to get into today, but the idea was like they were able to leverage a lot of the tool sets that we have today, Azure Data Factory and the web APIs, to kind of bootstrap that data state in Dataverse, which they ported over those Excel spreadsheets to be 30 plus Dataverse table with business logic and flows to automate the business processes and apps on top of it, right? And the really, really awesome part about this for me is they first rolled this out in a matter of months with Hui and one other data analyst, where if they had actually previously gone to IT and said, hey, could you go build this for me? And they're like, well, we think we could do it in like 9 months. And they would have basically missed the window for their annual maintenance planning. And so because they were able to get the prototype and production in the matter of 3 to 4 months, right, they were able to scale this out from their original deployment in what's called the curl environment to their next one. And it's this portability, the idea that you can go and scale your solution and pour it over to multiple different types of applications. It can scale up to the battle-tested scale that we have today that's been proven out by Dynamics. And there's a great story, I think it was over a year ago, we're talking about IKEA that has this custom solution extending Dynamics built on the same platform because it's Dataverse that's scaling globally. You're talking about 50 markets across the world, 400 stores, employees. They have experiences and business processes around how their workers can deliver a personal experience to a given high-touch customer. And it's that same experience across the world, because you can go from, this, what used to be kind of like these very siloed processes that were very manual or error prone, to a reusable and highly scaled that benefits from that battle tested scale of dynamics. And we're doing so much more around this today, right? And I don't think we do enough. We're going to actually be talking about some of the scale that we can support today on our platform, because we're built on Azure technology underneath the covers. Not only from a storage perspective, the fact that we smartly store your binary objects or your audit logs in the right technology behind the scenes. We don't stuff everything in SQL from our perspective, which allows us to scale that much more. But also how far you can scale your asynchronous or your API throughput on the platform today, because we're really continuing to advance what's possible. And there's a ton of customers, here's some of those kind of the upper limit of what's possible today that we're ever expanding. And it's a point of emphasis for us to continue to improve this scale coming soon. And so next year, there's a couple things that we're working on. First is this idea that we're going to make a lot of noise around how hyperscale is coming to Dataverse, right? So we're bringing that power of Azure SQL hyperscale underneath the covers to every Dataverse environment. So you don't need to, right? This idea that you can scale storage that much further, right? And you can scale your compute through more bulk type of APIs, which increases your effective throughput. This is really something that we're working on, right? And I'm going to asterisk here that it doesn't mean that you can store, 100 terabytes within one Dataverse table. We're going to have new capabilities around how you can manage and monitor some of this, because there's still query performance to be optimized underneath the covers. But it's this idea that you can scale that much more. And also we're going to advance this notion of kind of what we're calling an elastic table, which is the idea that, say you have to have either high scale upload of just raw data that you then upsert into your data model through flows or through plugins, but also you need low latency access to a set of data for some of your workloads. We're bringing this notion of what we call elastic tables backed by Cosmos DB behind the scenes to support some of those types of workloads. Another thing that's been long awaited is this idea that some of your data that's in standard tables or activities tables today, it doesn't need to be accessible kind of really live and warm through your application, but you still need access to it in a cold way to support certain kind of asynchronous compliance requests. And so one of the things that we're going to be rolling out is this idea that you can set up retention policies that kind of essentially take a view of data for some of these really high, record types of data models, and still keeps it within Dataverse, but that access to them is a little bit more restricted. And so it improves the performance, allows you to not have to go build your own compliance bespoke solution. You can just bet on Dataverse, set up a retention policy, and leverage some of the access experiences we're going to support for how you can provide a compliance access to that data. And the last thing that is a little bit further out, but important to call out, is we've talked a lot about some of what you can do around the analytics of your data. You saw Tim talking about what you could do within Synapse, and generating some of those insights or potential actions on that data through serverless SQL, through Spark jobs, through applying AI models. Well, we're thinking about how we can bring those types of analytical workloads alongside the existing operational and business process workloads we support today. Something that we've kind of dubbed or code-named analytical tables is another area that's coming soon. So more scale, more hyperscale that Dataverse solves for you, and we scale so you don't have to go build the work to do that on your side. So you don't have to go build the compliance solution. So you don't have to go build as much analytical workloads in a bespoke way, because you can do more within the platform. And then the last slide before we get to the questions here is also this area of focus that we're testing out, which is really around providing kind of like two sides of problems for especially bigger enterprises. And it's this idea that, number one, a lot of enterprises don't know where sensitive data resides within their environment, within their tenancy. And then they also potentially have a lot of common data that they want to be able to discover, right, and reuse and attach to. And so if you're not familiar with it, take a look at what Microsoft Purview service is starting to offer, which is really this idea that you can build a data map for all of your data within your enterprise. And again, it's more applicable to if you have a lot of different data sources within a given customer. But Dataverse coming soon is a preview. I think in the next 1 to 2 months, we'll have a connector within that Purview experience so that your environments can be mapped as a part of the Uber data estate within Purview. And then the idea is that once it's mapped, you can start to leverage the tools of Purview to classify that data, identify if it's sensitive data. And this is a first step towards us providing more data governance, data protection capabilities within the platform. This is that first step along that journey. And I believe that like this will solve some real problems and generate some real insights for enterprises that are really dealing with large data estates and development at scale. And the idea is that once we have this, there's a lot that we can unlock for customers that are trying to bet more and build more and store more sensitive data on the platform. So there's a ton that's coming. If you remember anything from the conversation today, remember that we're trying to make some of the capabilities of Dataverse more approachable, right? And the ability to activate your data state and set it up, model your data state and your custom business logic easier. We're trying to improve and increase the number of integrations and capabilities that light up for you because you did that work, right? We're trying to accelerate that delivery, accelerate the number of solutions you can deliver. And then we're trying to make sure that while we do so, we're adding more capabilities that allow you to scale more horizontally across your enterprise to more solutions, and scale more vertically within a given solution that wants to support more throughput, more users, and more integrations, right? And so this is like, I would say kind of like a placemat of investments, many of which I've talked about today. And we'll share this after the fact. And if any of you have questions with us, I'm not going to kind of walk through it in detail. But it really is like these are kind of along those 3 vectors that we're investing on. And with that, I think we have a ton of questions from a Q&A perspective. So what I'll do is switch over to that. And let's start working through this here. All right. You can all see my screen here, right?
Yeah, we're good, James.
Cool. So I think this is a really good question. I don't know if Sunil's on the call, but if not, I'll answer it.
Yeah, he just dropped.
He just dropped. Okay. So the goal is that yes, the idea is that formula columns will support this. Like the idea is that if you're building a formula column on a table that has a relationship, so it's kind of set up the common way you would set up your tables and related data today, that yes, you would be able to kind of support your business logic and querying across those. That is very much part of the intent for formula columns. It's not in the current preview today. This is something that we want to work towards because really PowerFX formula columns and PowerFX being that language for custom actions and plugins, that's how we want to go. And the idea is that's also how what you can leverage for business rules too as a part of that, right? This is the direction we want to go into, right? And make the current capabilities and components and logic that you can already build accessible in PowerFX. Not saying we're going to migrate anyone, but make them accessible to be written and customized in the PowerFX language. Awesome. Form control and model-driven apps to handle M2M relationships. This is a good question. I don't have an answer for this one, but I promise to take this one. If Nirav knows, he can speak to it. If not, we'll have to take this back to our Power Apps team.
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
Yeah, I just make sure I understand, and then maybe whoever kind of voted for this or asked the question can provide some details in the chat. But if I'm thinking about this correctly, this would be something akin to what we have for activity parties on like appointments or emails, right? Where you can, on like the two lines, essentially select or multiple kind of records or contacts, users, etc. Something like that, but more generically for an M2M relationship. As far as I know, this is not something that's on the roadmap today, but yeah, definitely something we can go take back to the PowerUps team, given that we do have kind of that building block already available with activities today. It would be really kind of an evolution of what exists there and making that available for use for more generic M2M relationships.
Yeah, and maybe someone could drop an example in the chat of the use case that you want there. That would help too. And I know some of this gymnastics is possible within Canvas apps and custom pages with very custom forms and patches, but it's certainly not seamless or turnkey when it comes to model-driven. Where'd my cursor go? Oh, there it is. Why did the pricing for Dataverse data storage increase by 800%? And will this cost drop in the future? So I think that this is a really good question. And I know that there's been a lot of changes in how the Dataverse really storage or capacity model is structured over the past 5 years, even before I joined the Dataverse team. And just to kind of like outline some of the history very briefly for the folks here, although I didn't really cover it in the presentation here. Like there was a point in time where, before I think it was even called Dataverse back then, but for Dynamics 365, you would pay for actually a high cost per environment. And there really was only database storage capacity, right? So even if you were stuffing files and binary files and leveraging that type of capability, you were paying one price for your storage and a high price per environment. And so a change that was made several years ago was to evolve that model. And I'll speak to kind of like part of the impetus around why in a second. And that change was you no longer have a cost per environment. Every environment requires you to have at least 1 gig of database capacity first to provision the environment. And then that was the first change. So no longer pay for environment. You have to, essentially your environment cost comes out of your storage capacity. And the second thing that was changed is there's no longer just database capacity. We now have database capacity, log capacity, and file capacity. And really what's happening behind the scenes is we're leveraging different storage technologies behind the scenes, right? And providing different prices behind the scenes so that we smartly store your audit log data, which is what's stored, high scale audit logs, right? Stored in one way, in a high perform way. It's charging one price for files, so binary data within the platform. And then we have a price for, yes, the existing kind of relational data. So like it was really the reason why the pricing model changed, right, was also in part with, this was also part of how Dataverse or Common Data Service back then became a bigger part of the Power Platform models, and the idea that in the Power Platform products like Power Apps and Power Automate, you want to be able to provision a lot of different environments, spin them up quickly and ephemerally in some cases for DevOps processes, and the cost per environment, right, is arduous, and it requires a lot of red tape and purchasing processes. And we had to become more agile as a platform. So when we moved from very high cost of environment and single storage to kind of like just making it based on the capacity model, that is what was aligned with some of the pricing changes, right? Another thing I'll call out before I move on out of licensing is that Dataverse isn't a standalone product today. It's always sold through Dynamics or Power Platform licenses, which already include storage as a part of it. And part of the licensing intent with those included storages is that purchasing a bunch of additional add-on storage, right, is not like our goal. The idea is that you should be able to solve a significant majority of your application problems with the included capacity that you use. It's only when you want to run much higher type of scale workloads where you may need to purchase additional capacity. At least that's the intent behind the model. So I hope I did that justice. I'm happy to, if you have questions, you can just email me, not saying you have to put yourself in the chat. And I'm happy to have more conversations around this too. Recording, I assume this means record sharing. Does record sharing still affect Dataverse performance due to the POA table? Any performance considerations when using record sharing? I think the short answer is it's complicated. And Nirav, you wanted to, I think you can take this one.
Yeah, well, I've maybe taken a step back from POA specifically. The authorization system within the platform. I think for folks that have been around a while, obviously it's very complicated in terms of kind of the different capabilities and the way you can kind of manage and kind of the different types of issues that could manifest. Under the covers over the last several years, there's actually been a tremendous amount of change within the authorization system to kind of really reduce the impact that those kind of authorization actions have on user activity within the system. So things like the cascading behavior of sharing and deletions and things like that, or updates to role assignments. A lot of that has been really replumbed and re-architected behind the scenes to minimize the impact that it has on end user interactive operations within the system. So the things like sharing themselves, we have made significant progress and improvements in terms of kind of the performance and stability and kind of the impact that it has. Now, what can I say? There will never be an issue for any possible scenario. I can't guarantee that that would happen, but certainly we're a lot more capable of handling kind of to that enterprise grade load that James was talking about earlier. In terms of the authorization system, we're able to handle far more complexity and scale within the authorization system than we've had before. And we continue to add new capabilities, things like shareable links now as a new way to share records and data across users without having to create kind of POA records underneath the covers is something that we've recently added. It's still not necessarily manifesting in the experiences, but you'll see that start rolling out. So similar to what you can do in your Office experiences, where you can share, grab a link, and kind of implicitly share records. That's also now something that's available within Dataverse and will become something that's more mainstream within the system. And so we'll keep enhancing, making improvements there. The modernized business units is another one where now instead of having to use sharing to share across VUs, you can actually kind of set up access policies to allow people to access across VUs in a more natural way. So we've kind of restricted and limited how often you have to use the sharing and kind of the underlying POA table to make it easier and more effective and efficient for you to manage that role-based access security across the system in a more natural way.
Thank you. Thank you, Nirav. I like this question from Rob. I assume it says, will Dataverse be adding the ability to create SQL-like views, potentially combining data from more than one table? I think that this is a really interesting question. I am kind of curious, like, was there an intent by using the word SQL there in terms of the intent of like you want to define this using SQL, or just the novelty of using a type of query language outside of Fetch XML today to create views? I think my high level answer is that I think this idea of potentially expanding the way that we provide kind of like shareable views of data and not just kind of like expanding kind of what we have with either personal or system views today, and also potentially new ways of authoring those is something we've kind of considered, right? But there's various different ways, and I'm trying not to get myself in trouble with Nirav here, because it's more from a product perspective. We've been evaluating, hey, are there better ways or more seamless ways that people can build views on the data in Dataverse without us breaking some of the patterns we have today? But I'm interested to hear what this, people want to share, what they would like, either from like how they would consume or share the views, and or how they would author them, because there's various different avenues we have kind of discussed. And I am interested to hear what this audience, and if you have perspectives, you can email me too. But there's many different ways we've considered. There might be some avenues coming next year. I think one example, by the way, is like the analytical kind of view or tables that I talked about, which is like if we start to bring more analytical type of workloads, that is one potential application where this might manifest. Now, there might be different caveats to that, but that's like kind of one of the potential workloads we've been considering. But I love this question because go ahead, Nirav. Yeah.
Yeah, just I know I'd love to hear more either in the chat or offline on what you want to do with the view, right? Is it really for read, query, reporting? Are you looking for full CRUD on it, or do you want different authorization? I can imagine lots of different ways of this manifesting, and I know, for instance, for some of the folks here that have kind of F&O systems, based on the chat, there's kind of the concept of entities and tables. Are you looking for something more like that, or something different? Because to James's point, we can go lots of different directions with something like this, but understanding what you're trying to accomplish with it will help us kind of orient the right way to think about solutioning for it.
And I think our challenge here is manifested in the chat, because Praveen's saying, well, maybe I want a more approachable query language. Philip's talking about, potentially just programmatically being able to use a more SQL-like endpoint, and I'm just programmatically accessing it maybe for analytical purposes. Or it's just that it's really hard to go build the view, and XRM Toolbox built by our MVP is just a better experience. So like, again, even here, I think, is it the building? Is it the accessing? It is like how it's composed within the application. There are many different avenues we could do. We are kind of discussing it. Please keep adding, and maybe we'll follow up with some of the folks here once we gonna get closer. So I really appreciate the feedback. I think it is an area of discussion. We'll say that much.
James
someone here
asked to go faster, so we can try to speed up.
Should I start consuming or adopting the ALM accelerator for Power Platform way for Power Pipelines? Do both, okay? Power Pipelines is not going to solve all of your advanced, and nor is it trying to supplant ALM accelerator, but it will help. I would say once Power Pipelines goes live, leverage it where you can for some of your easier workloads, but still do more advanced things. ALM accelerator is always going to be ahead of Power Pipelines. And for those who don't know, this is a new capability that's coming to manage environments. You'll probably hear about it within the next month. It's around seamlessly doing change management and deployment CI/CD across environments. Think of it as productizing the ALM accelerator. In Dataverse is the way to get an auto number column. I know there's a default auto number column, but it's a string type. I need number. I think this is actually an area that we're investing in, especially in our convergence story around, there's some chatter around how Dynamics Finance and Operation applications, once you have those dual linked or linked to a Power Platform Dataverse environment, you already have virtual tables today. The idea of converging the data types to be more consistent, because auto number is kind of a more native part of the F&O and finance and operation applications. This is something that we're working on. More to come next year on this one. Will Dataverse be considering different pricing level based on type of data? So this is a trap question. Will we be considering it? We are not currently considering it. I would answer that the first point of focus is just to have a native long-term retention capability that can take live data and make it cold data, right? We're not going to be promising any changes in our pricing or how that long-term retained data is billed initially when we ship this feature. The idea is that we're focused first on making this a really good feature, and a feature that stops you from having to go build your own long-term compliance solution app separate outside the platform. However, right, I could see us discussing this, especially as we start to enable more of those different types of capabilities, especially analytical capabilities in the platform going forward. So we are not currently considering it, but I think it is a conversation to be revisited next year based on some of the feedback and usage of the capabilities we'll be rolling out. Hopefully I didn't get into trouble with that answer. Oh, we already answered this one. Can I create an external CRUD web application using Dataverse, or must I use Power Pages? Yes, you can. Yes, customers are building Angular web applications directly on the web API. There are customers building their own APIM using the existing API and using custom actions. I think you saw some of that in the previous session too. You can go build your own custom web app just using the OData web APIs and the extensibility that we provide for building custom APIs along Dataverse today. Customers do that. Hopefully over time, you can be more turnkey with some of these solutions with Power Pages, but do some of your more higher scale, business critical, higher customized applications using kind of your web app or Angular web app, custom web applications, but you absolutely can do this today. Adding a model-driven app component like the forms view to a custom page or Canvas apps in the roadmap. When can I expect to see that in preview? It is not currently in preview. This is, I know, something that I'm pushing very hard with the Power Apps team to bring more model-driven goodness to Canvas apps or custom pages or custom Canvas pages that are embedded within model-driven apps. I really personally want to advance this in the next calendar year, but it's not currently in the books to my knowledge in the current semester through April. When using SharePoint as file storage for Dataverse, is it possible to link two libraries to separate file? So how you use it? I don't know the answer to this question. Nirav, do you?
I assume this is talking about the SharePoint integration that exists
Yes.
on tables. As far as I recall, there's not a way to link to two separate sites using that capability today.
Yes, that's right. I think it's a little bit very point-to-point integration, although I think this is an interesting question of maybe like how do we improve the SharePoint integration with Dataverse going forward. I think it is something we're discussing. I think it's a good question that I'll take as a follow-up. Make that Power Apps is great. It'd be great, it'd be a bit faster. This is actually something we're working on right now. Like literally, I think if you go to create a new table 3 months ago versus now, we have improved the latency 50% already. And not only the load time, but the creation time. We know it's slow. This is something that if it's not improved in the next 6 months, then you can hold me accountable in the next summit. It is something we know and we're working on in conjunction with the Power Apps team. Can you just suggest a pathway to use Dataverse? So I think a great, maybe if Audrey's still there, she can share some great resources. There are some great points on kind of AKA MS Dataverse or some of the lab assets we shared about earlier, great places to get started. But whoever you are, if you any learnings or if you have any questions, send me an email. Upgrade path from DV to D365. This is a great question. It's not currently something that will be solved in the current semester by April, although it continues to come up. I think it's definitely something that continues to be something we're tracking, and I do not have a date at this point in time. It will. I think it will eventually come, and it's just a matter of like when the forcing function is for us as a platform to prioritize this work. By the way, we have come a lot closer towards this with some of the work to support Dataverse for Teams and some of the decoupling. So it actually is it is not as far away as it used to be, and so we are advancing some of this, but I still don't have a concrete date for you. So actually, the answer to this, will it be a replacement to the current solution deployment model, like simply directly Git-based deployment or something similar? So the ALM accelerator and Power Pipelines is the closest thing that's coming to kind of more automating your solution deployment and within the product, right? Doing something through the GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps Actions is all possible today, but take a look at managed environments and Power Pipelines coming within managed environments. It'll be launching in preview within the next 1 to 2 months, and that is the more productized version of what we have in the ALM accelerator today. What tools do you suggest to test solutions built on Dataverse today? Note the test engine announcement is interesting. Well, this is a very broad question, right? Because how you test or monitor various different aspects of the platform is because it's so vast, is difficult. Like one thing I will say is very recently we added the ability to plumb the telemetry from your plugins into your App Insights solution, right? And App Insights and kind of like having more seamless monitoring and our flow of our monitoring telemetry into App Insights is kind of been our biggest focus so far. But you know, if you're looking at more automated testing, like that is another area with managed environments that we've discussed at a high level at the platforms. But I'd love to know more around what you mean by testing, because it again is very broad, and Nirav, you can chime in if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, I think James is spot on, right? There's, depending on kind of which parts of the system, the low code pieces versus the pro code pieces, there's going to be different solutions. But I think it's an interesting question in the sense that we probably do need to provide better guidance on kind of the different components and how best to do that. So definitely something for us to go back and think through.
Date of the GA of the Delta format. I believe the preview of it is hitting by the end of January. And I think the GA will be after that date. I think the goal is to try to have it GA'd by April, but I think that is not like set in stone. I think the idea is to like get it in preview and verify it with the community. The solution has
Yeah, James,
Closing.
we're about
Oh,
5
yeah,
minutes
sorry.
over, and
Roz,
I
yell
think
at me.
there's more
Yell at me if I should
sessions
stop.
still to go.
Sorry about that. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the time. Apologies for going way over. It was a pleasure to talk with all of you today. I'll share the document with Roz. Roz can tell me where to drop it. But thank you all for letting us connect with you today.
Plus one, thank you all for all the great engagement and questions.
Thank you so much, Nirav and James, once again. Huge round of applause for Nirav and James, as well as Audrey and everyone else. Thank you so much, and thank you for all the questions, and thank you for taking your time out to answer all our questions. Wow, fantastic, guys. Really, really excited, and really thank you for kind of taking time out from your busy schedule to share all that news and answer all our questions. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Wow, that was excellent. So there we have it. There you go, guys. So that was James and Nirav. And we are now going to move on to the next session of the day, which is none other than Wael Hamzeh. You may